This is the presentation about the mysterious country which everyone has forgotten about, which I love as a case study, and we can learn so many things from this country which the modern world has somewhat shunned. So, I've had to obscure a few things, and there is a prize, by the way. There's another teddy up for grabs, if you know this. This country, by the way, is in modern times. I'm not talking about, the Roman times or. So it had no electricity bill. Electricity was free to all of its citizens. There were no interest rates on loans. Banks were public, and loans for citizens were 0% by law, hence no fat cat banker wankers. The leader promises people that he would not give his parents or his dad a house until everyone in the country had one. If you've got the answer ready. Don't shout, don't shout. Okay. The leader's father subsequently died in a tent during his reign. All newlyweds received the equivalent of $50,000 from the government to buy their own house and start a family. Before this leader, only 25% of the population could read or write. He then made education free for everyone. Reading and writing then went from 25% to 88% of the population. The UK is only 83%. Medical treatment was free for everyone. If medical treatment was required outside of the country, the government paid for it and also gave the equivalent of £2,000 for accommodation and travel. If you wanted to become a farmer, you got a free house, equipment, seeds, and livestock. I mean, this is awesome. Petrol was the equivalent of 10 pence per litre. No country had, there's zero debt whatsoever and had over £100 billion worth of monetary reserves. Some young adults that couldn't get jobs after school, so the state paid an average salary, i.e. a UBI, for the profession as if they were employed until they got a job. All citizens had a profit share of the oil its country sold. Initially, it provided £17,000 to every citizen, giving it away there. All mothers received an equivalent of £3,000 per birth. Gender equality was a reality. Women were free to dress and work as they liked. 40 loaves of bread cost only 10 pence. 25% of all citizens had degrees, and the leader conducted the world's largest irrigation project to provide water to the entire country. By the end of his reign, the country had the highest GDP per capita, highest life expectancy in the continent, and fewer people lived below the poverty line than in the Netherlands. The country was one of 3 in the world that had zero debt. Any guesses?
UAE?
Nope. Nope. Wait, who's that over there? Libya. But is that why you put your hand up? I'm going to give 2. Libya. Gaddafi was that dude. Everyone hates Gaddafi because what has the West done since his overthrow? They have devilized? I've just made a new word. Demonized him. He's a mass murdering, genocidal megalomaniac. That's what the world now thinks of Gaddafi. But other than his slight murdering tendencies, I actually think he was a very good country leader, if you were to ignore the murdering side. But some would always argue that in order to have full total control of a country, to bring it out of its despair, you do need some murdering tendencies. So I'm out of breath. I really do need to get fit. But yeah, it was Libya. Libya was freaking awesome before we suddenly invaded them. And I was in the Air Force when the Libyan campaign kicked off. And basically, the world knew nothing of Libya. And then in the space of months, we had toppled the country. And I always look at everything from an economics point of view. Libya had zero debt, right? Which meant the Federal Reserve and the world central banks had no control over their monetary affairs. And it was supposed to be a rebel uprising of farmers that toppled Gaddafi. The day after we killed Gaddafi, what did these rebel farmers do? They set up a central bank and got a $200 billion loan from the Federal Reserve. That seems pretty suspect to me. Anyway, not going into that. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I got into a bit of a debate in a private group. Now, I don't like debates. I've set myself a rule to not engaging any online debates, and I've stuck to it pretty well. And it's why I also use Facebook as a bit of a social observation thing. I use Facebook as my own human behavioral petri dish. What I like to do is throw out some social hand grenades in terms of my Facebook statuses, and then bugger off and just watch the comment thread. I put one out there the other day, and it got a bit heated. I didn't say anything, just people arguing with themselves. But it's interesting, because you learn a lot of how people think. And I haven't put one out on Libya or Gaddafi or whatever. I mean, it's a bit like saying Saddam Hussein was awesome. And I'm not saying he was awesome, but I'm saying what he did for his country was good, right? You'd look at this list, if you didn't know it was Gaddafi, and think, Jesus Christ, I wish I lived in that country. Now, in this private group, we started talking about governments or governance and how to run a country. And I've said for a long time, if I was ever a dictator, I would probably be more hated than any dictator on the planet, because I would do everything from a utilitarianism point of view and from an economics point of view, but that would also mean screwing a whole bunch of things up and breaking lots of things in the process of getting there. But the reason democracy, in my opinion, doesn't work is because everyone's too fixated on getting re-elected. It's all about the votes, voting, voter optics, all that sort of stuff. And so we got onto the topic of governance. Now, democracy and governance is a relatively new-ish thing, because for most of human existence, it's been a monarchy of some sort, or a totalitist type. Well, I can't talk. Just give me some numbers, that's better. Totalitarian. Thank you for the Italian. Had to teach me English there. Thank you. Yeah, for most of human history, it's just been, some leader dictating the terms, right? So democracy is a relatively new thing. Communism is a relatively new thing-ish. So when you really boil it down, there's actually 5 different types of ruling. You have democracy, which is what we sort of are doing at the moment, where people vote for a leader. The leader supposedly does stuff. If they're not good, they get ousted. If they do well, they potentially get re-elected. We all know crony capitalism, or crony democracy actually is what is in place. We then have monarchy, royal family. So if you're lucky to be of a noble descent, or you're the correct bloodline, you're supposedly, the monarch. And that's what happened in the olden times, predominantly. You have authoritarian, so that is where the government has total control of everything. And then you have oligarchies, where you have a select bunch of families that control the whole show. So Russia, it's nearly always been an oligarchy-type ruled country, where you have a couple, 2 or 3 main families. Italy used to be a bit like that after the Romans, and it still is there in Sicily, I guess, or mafia, which basically is an oligarchy. And then you have totalitarians. Cheers, Elisa. And that's where you have, it's very similar to like a monarchy, but you have one crazy person at the top that has total control of the government and all the lives of the citizens of the country. Hitler is a prime example. Hitler, Stalin, etc. Mussolini, totalitarians, right? So you can take this concept of governance, whatever you want, and then they then break off into more of the sort of the economics style, which is really, it boils down to 3 things. You have a capitalist country, communist country, or a socialist country. Capitalism, free market supposedly is the thing. Communism is where everyone owns the same thing. We share everything. No one's rich, no one's poor. And socialism is a less extreme version of communism. They're both very Marxist, or they stem from Karl Marx. Now, what is the best type of governance? Now, this is an argument countries have been having. In fact, we almost had World War III. I mean, the Cold War was literally capitalism against communism. Humans do this. It used to be Protestants against Catholics. Now it's communism against capitalism. And now the world is shifting into a weird thing. So the World Economic Forum wants stakeholder capitalism. And if you read the book and read their website, they're very clear about this. They want to move the world into stakeholder capitalism, which is basically a very fancy way of calling the bastard love child of capitalism and socialism together. It's like, we want this stakeholder capitalism, but we, unelected officials, want to control the world, whilst appearing that we're giving back. And I have the very controversial opinion that none of these are correct, and none of these, and actually, really, to actually do meaningful change, you need to be either a monarch that controls everything or a totalitarian, really. Because if you look at all the countries in the recent years, let's say over the last 200 years, the countries that have gone from nothing to doing really big things, they've all been from one person driving at the helm for an extended period of time. You literally can't do shit if you're elected for 4 years. You pretend to do stuff for 2 years, and then you spend the next 2 years trying to get re-elected. You're simply a front man. You're not actually doing stuff. But if you look at what China's done since the 1970s, they've done a lot, economically speaking. They went from paddy fields to the biggest economy on the planet now. Again, I'm not saying that they're good. They've done a lot of bad. So is every government. But in my opinion, to take a country to some sort of utopian sort of world, I think looking at this from a purely first principles point of view, you need someone that actually has control. Someone that's empowered, that can actually change things. Look at, like, the US is just an absolute mess, right? You can have a president, great. Can they pass anything? No, because you've got Congress and you've got all the different parties. It takes ages to actually get something approved. So you need someone that can actually change stuff.
Singapore's probably the best example.
Yeah.
Because they less.
Yeah, Singapore is a good idea.
But like Lee Kuan Yew, their building has just been exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the whole world's gone kaput. There are still some shiny lights out there. And they have no debt, I don't think.
No, but he also did say, before he died, when someone said to him, what happens if the wrong party get elected? He was like, we'll roll down the streets of the tanks.
Yeah. But the problem with, we'll come on to this. So you need control. You need to actually be able to change things. You also need control for a long time. If you want to actually do meaningful change, you can't just do something, expect it to work in the next year or two, which is where democracy falls down. But the adverse thing of that, if you have someone who's an absolute dickhead, and they're in for a long time, there's a lot of pain for a long time. If you have 10-year stints, that's 10 years of pain, or 10 years of mass murdering, or whatever. So there is catch-22 with all of these. You also need someone that's economically minded, whereas every politician in history has been somewhat of a numbnut when it comes to economics. They always think, I could just print my way out of whatever, and then rampant inflation kicks in years down the line. Not war-hungry. This is also the other thing. You need someone that is all these three, but also not war-hungry, because war doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone other than the weapons companies. So you need to somewhat turn yourself into a Switzerland-type country, Liechtenstein, Switzerland type thing, which does all of this sort of stuff. It would help if your country had natural economic sort of reserves like oil. I mean, Libya, it helped Gaddafi that they had lots of oil. So it does help. But if you don't, you need someone economically minded so you can work around your absence of natural reserves. And you must have minimal expansionistic urges. So countries, I'm a historian basically, I'm a student of history. And every time we've seen countries with all of these, and there've been a few, where they go wrong is where they get into the war stuff. They're like, things are great, but I want more. I'm going to take this country. Uh-oh. Only pain endures. And, and they start becoming expansionistic. Hitler, he could have lasted a lot longer if he didn't start rolling into other countries. Yes or no? Yeah, I'm not saying I like him, definitely not. But if you look at it from a pure gaming perspective, because like Age of Empires, like he would have lasted a lot longer and probably would still be a major world power today if he didn't kick off World War II. I'm just saying. So unfortunately, you do need a dictator of some sort with all these things. And it's really rare. And we don't see many iterations of this because it takes time. So really, you have to evaluate leaders over a long period of time. And I don't think there's anyone out there at the moment that matches all of these because unfortunately, we've got democracy. And I don't think it works. And very soon we'll have the World Economic Forum's version of democracy, which is stakeholder capitalism, which is even worse. So, and this is why I really do love seasteading. This is what it's called. I think I mentioned this on a trading pub. I would love, one, for there to be some sort of politics simulator, which accounts for all the different variables from markets and social to mass thinking, all that sort of stuff, so you can actually try and iterate fast and see what the best type of governance is. But I would love a water world type thing where we have these huge floating cities with obviously someone leading it, and you know, with one floating city of 50,000 people could merge into another floating city. And if people don't like it, okay, I'm just going to detach my city. We'll go back to our old ways, etc. And people, just normal market dynamics, people will find the community, the city that actually works the best. So that's my very, very quick Libya was awesome until it wasn't. And now it's great.